by with a little help from my friends. Nothing is more true than that. Okay. Oh, I know it's just choking. So I'm gonna choke bad enough up here anyway. So is the sound okay and everything? Is everyone caffeinated, please? Sarcasm needs caffeine. So I guess we'll get started. That's fine. So about a year and a half ago, Hands and Voices Wyoming reached out to Stephanie to be here this week, or last year, this week, I guess. And we started talking, and pretty soon, it turned into a thing where they invited me too. So it's weird, but what I wanted to talk about today, and what I was asked to talk about today, was happiness and happy hour. So this is maybe possibly the earliest happy hour in the state of Wyoming, because it's 8 o'clock, and we're having coffee for happy hour today. So it's a little odd, but bear with me, because I have zero experience in the world of the DHH culture outside of that I'm married to Stephanie Olson, and we've been together now for about 40 years this year, and so I've learned a lot on the sidecar of this, but as an expert in DHH, I am not. I'm more of just a husband and a dad, but I have been working in the field of mental health for about 40 years. A little background about me is I've worked at a place called Forest Heights Lodge, which is a residential facility for boys in Evergreen, Colorado. And what would happen is these boys would be struggling with mental health issues, and their families would say, "Holy cow, we got to do something about this," and they'd send them to us in Evergreen, Colorado, and they would be with us for a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And what we learned is that we could create an environment that was really stabilizing and effective and helpful for these young boys. And then we kind of fix them and send them home. Well, long story short, last year we had COVID. And you can't put 24 boys in one house and travel from all over the country and be safe. And so we closed our program. But what really happened is we moved ahead into a different model, and we're doing that right now. Mental health is something that we're all talking about today. Mental health is something that one of the blessings of COVID going forward, and that's a weird thing to say, but one of the things about COVID going forward is we're figuring out new ways to do things, and we're looking at old ways of doing things and thinking, maybe we could do better. And so that's where I'm coming from, and here we go. So welcome to Happy Hour. What a break that we are here in this place together. I love Bill Murray, so hope you guys do too. Now I have to work my tech. Welcome. I knew this was going to be a good day, and it is going to be a good day, because if you start off your happy hour with "it's a good day," it'll be one. So there it is. I said to myself, it is. So here we go, ready? Is it going to be a good day? Yes, okay, great, good. I know that audience participation at 8 in the morning is hopeless. Doesn't matter what you're doing. And before we get too far into the weeds, these blackboards are dedicated to the voices in my head and my wife, who has to live with us. It's painful for her a lot of the time. Oh, history on the blackboard. These blackboards that you'll be seeing today, about 5 or 6 years ago, I got really bored, and so I put a blackboard up at the top of our driveway, because I just really felt like the world needed some education. Actually, I just up the top. And And the other thing is that we live on a kind of a blind curve on a mountain road. And when you're going up a hill, on a mountain road that's skinny, and people are freaking out because of switchbacks, what happens is they drive in the middle of the road. And so I put a blackboard on the outside curve so that they would drive like this. Oh, what does that say? And then they say, that's stupid. And then they get back over, but they wouldn't run into anybody. So that's why these blackboards are at our driveway, and it just kind of took off after that. I will admit right now, I'm not the author. If I know who to quote, I would quote them. If I find them on the interweb and they're anonymous, they stay anonymous, and sometimes I just make them up. But I've got, went through the thing. So this is your blackboard. This is your coach chalk top, blackboard top. Also, in all humility, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. I hope. In other words, you kind of go, yeah. But sometimes reminders are good. Sometimes reminders are really helpful. So let's think about a couple things first. Last year, we were supposed to be here, but we weren't here. And you guys weren't here because of this little thing called COVID, right? But we're also here because of other things in our life. It's not just all COVID, right? There are things like being hard of hearing. There are things like deafness. There are things like mental illness. There are things like job loss. There are things like all kinds of things. And some of them are tough. And dealing with that sometimes is a type of an ambiguous loss. It's like, I like that line. Ambiguous loss is a loss that is unclear and lacks resolution. Well, sometimes it's clear. I can't hear. It's clear. There's a pandemic. But where's the resolution? And sometimes we don't have all that time and all that ability to have a resolution. It's right there, right for us, right now. Well, we want it. And we carry that. And that's hard. And we've been carrying a lot. And in the last year and 3 months, we've been carrying more than we've ever carried in a lot of ways. And it's a load that is sneaky. And as we work towards resolution for healthcare, hearing care, vision care, healthcare, all these things, there's losses. I lost our entire program. I lost a program that was 65 years old. And we're coming up from the ashes. People said, well, you should call yourself a Phoenix program because you're rising from the ashes. I'm like, yeah, except for one, it's been taken. And two, it's ashes that means it burned out. It came down, and there's a loss to that. We have to acknowledge it. So if you think about this unresolved loss, or these hard to resolve losses that we've been facing in this last year and a half, there's this other thing that I learned about. It's called surge capacity. Do you ever notice how when things really go poorly, you have all this energy to do something, Like, let's say you're up on the roof. I was talking about there's a roof reference here. But you're up on the roof, or as Stephanie would call it, the top of the house. And you drop your toolkit, you drop your hammer. How quick can you grab that before it goes off the roof, right? Fast. You've heard about the moms who can lift a car, right? Surge capacity is when something goes poorly, and you have this big adrenal rush, and you can just do stuff. You can do it faster, you can do it quicker, you can do all these things, right? And human beings are built for this. We're built to have this surge capacity. But what happens in a situation of ambiguous loss or long and unending trouble is you get exhausted. And I think all of us have been living in a state of sneaky exhaustion. I think it's okay to acknowledge that. Our surge capacity is having a hard time surging because we just have to keep surging and surging and surging. And it gets tired. And so I just wanted to start by acknowledging that we've been through a heck points because I do, so I'm not going to read my PowerPoints as much as I can. So I'll leave that to you guys. So what's the answer to ambiguous loss and surge capacity that is just exhausted? And the answer is connect. It's just to connect to people, and to connect to the things around you. Because, you know, one of the things is when we're talking about our kids, right? As professionals, sometimes we talk about, you know, our work. But this is not your work. This is your child. This is your family, right? This isn't your work. And it's not, sometimes when you're working with professionals, you feel like, well, my kid is behind, right? Where are they at? They're 2 months behind, they're 3 months behind, they're a year behind. Well, children are not races. They're not in a race. They're having a life, and they're having a life with you. So it's not really your work, it's your life. And it's not really a race, it's about growth and change. And the thing about growth and change is that's the rule of nature. The rule of nature is change. You pump a lot of oil in Wyoming, right? I know that, right? Well, that oil got there somehow, right? And it's like eons of change. Sometimes it goes fast, sometimes it goes slow, but the very nature of everything is changing. When we went from having to close our residential program a year ago, I was working with our board of directors and we said, what we need to be doing is thinking about what we do forward. How do we change? And learn this new phrase, and it's called second order change. The second order change is different than changing your socks. Second order change is change that happens when you change a system. When I look out at families, kids, moms, dads, partners, you don't just see one kid who's struggling. Because if one kid is having a hard time in a family of 3 or 15, how many other people are struggling? And the answer is all of them, right? Second order change is the idea that to really have effective change, you work with systems. And so right away what we started to look at in our program that we're trying to launch is instead of saying we're kids and families first, in other words, it's the kid's fault, we'll help the family and we'll all get better. We went to families and children. Because if you have a child who has a need, you have a family that has that need. If you're a mom or a dad with a child that has a need, and we all are, then we have needs too. Part of good mental health is understanding that all of our needs are connected. And our needs, they work together. When we get our needs met, our family can become what it can be. So, the name, this is my shameless plug for our new program. So we went from Forest Heights Lodge, which a lot of people would stop by our treatment center and ask for a room. And I was like, it's great. It's all-inclusive, comes with therapy, meals, it's great. But we're going to pivot down, we're going to move that down to Denver, we're going to work inpatient or outpatient only, and we're going to work with families, but there's our new logo. And the name of our program is going to be Decade 2 Connect. And I have to explain Decade 2 because some people don't get it, because it's weird, don't know what it is. But Decade 2 is every 10-year-old I ever met, and I work with a lot of them. What's the coolest thing about turning 10? Second decade, baby. 2 decades, right? So we thought we're gonna lean into this second decade idea. The second decade, the beginning of the adolescent brain. It's a really cool age. And it's also kind of when things kind of start to get really interesting. But you know what? We have decade 1 kids too. And first decade kids, And guess what? If you're a parent, you're a decade 3 person. Because 20 and on up, you're in your third, right? So I got your D1s and your D2s and your D3s. And the secret to all of this is to connect. So if we're going to connect, we have to change. But here's the deal about change. I want you to change. I'm good. Right? How many times do we just want everything around us to change? And how's that work? And you can make things happen, but you can't make a change, right? But here's the thing. In programs like this and weekends like this, you can come away all supercharged and you think, oh, I can't remember all this stuff, and oh my goodness. But here, give yourself a break. Because you're still changing, and you're still growing, right? And you're not dead yet. And that lifetime achievement award that secretly you kind of want to have, it's still possible. It can still happen. It can still happen. And it'll happen for your kids too. I know it's early. We're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about second order change. But here's the thing. You got to start. So, I love this quote by Emerson. Because you always hear the word encumbered, we're not cumbered. Let's begin today with too high a spirit to be cumbered. I actually looked that up. To be cumbered by your old nonsense. How many times do you tell yourself that things just aren't things that aren't true, right? And honestly, a lot. I'm not tall enough. I'm not short enough. I don't have enough. You just start at some point and you start telling yourself all this nonsense, right? I'm not enough. Of course you're enough. And if you're going to change, you have to have an idea about what you might want to do. So you wake up in the morning and you think to yourself, this world is here. What can I do with it? What can you bring to that? What imagination can you bring to that? And it's kind of fun. So, a little bit of change. I'm going to push my buttons again. Okay, so if we're going to change and we're going to be unencumbered or not cumbered by our nonsense, we have to take care of ourselves. Because it's really hard to be optimistic if you're going to be a grumpy. Because when the little gets grumpy, you won't stop. So, simmer yourself. Be optimistic. Don't you be grumpy. When the road gets bumpy, just smile. No? You know that one? Oh, I got one. I got one right down here. Start with self-discipline. The problem with self-discipline is this. You're the boss of you, and if you're like me, you're running fairly loose ship. But here's the deal. So do your kids. So we have to get serious about how we take care of ourselves. And we have to get serious about how we connect with each other. And we have to get serious about all that stuff. And we need to get serious and have fun doing it at the same time. Which is kind of a trick. But you never know. So you try. It's kind of fun. If the kids can't see us having fun, changing and greeting the day and being imaginative, then what model are we setting for our kids? You know, as a parent, we all probably talk too much. And as a parent of DHH kids, there's a difference between hearing and listening, right? They're watching. Our kids are watching. And if we can set a model for growth and change, and if we can set a model for imagination and happiness and being open to new ideas, the kids will get that. One of the most difficult things I've ever had as a parent with our children was when I realized that all the time I spent telling them stuff and doing stuff, right? And then I watched them grow up and they were listening. we are the proud parents of 2 adult children who are bound and determined to stay in the nonprofit world for the rest of their lives, just like their parents. And I never explained to them, there's really no profit in nonprofit, but they were following. And the other one is an artist. And if you want to talk about nonprofit lifestyles, have an artist as a child, because there's that's a lot of them too. But they are watching. Your kids are watching you. So how do you do this? You gotta start with you. You can't be perfect. And you gotta give yourself that first break. You're not gonna be perfect. But there's a million ways to be pretty good. And that's okay. Because is your kid gonna be perfect? Well, yes. They're not. Not for you. But are there a million ways for your kid to be good? Yes, there are. We'll work on that. So today, we're gonna try something, all right? I'm gonna give you a tip. I'm not gonna give you a million tips, but the price will like it. But I'm gonna give you one tip. Here's your first assignment. And it's really maybe the only assignment today. And that is, you gotta change, if you're gonna change your world, if you're gonna change the way you think, and if you're gonna change the way that you read the world and use your imagination and do all these cool things, you gotta do one simple thing, or it helps to do one simple thing. And that is work on the things you say. And if you're like me, you talk too much and you have all kinds of things to say, so you just have to focus in on one thing. And a bunch of years ago, I decided to focus on this one thing. And I don't know where I got it from, I stole it from somebody. But I stopped using the word but. Not really, because I still do it too much. But, see, I just didn't. And when I say that, I stop myself, I go, that's a non-starter. If you're going to work to connect with people, and connect with your language, and connect with your body and your essence, you have to remove barriers to connection. Now, if Stephanie comes up to me and says, Jody, darling, that's a lovely black shirt you're wearing this morning, but, and then whatever else he has to say. What just happened? She said, but. So now, I don't know if I'm wearing a lovely black shirt. I don't know if I'm really a darling. It all went into the tank because of one word, but. And if you don't think that's true, try it on your partner. Good morning, honey. Lovely day, bud. And just watch their face. I gotta go. And you know what? We were talking yesterday about with the EHH kids or in your own life, how important clear communication really is, right? Just having communication that is clear. But when you start adding words like but to things, it's like whiplash, right? But. This, which part am I paying attention? Did you ever tell one of your children to not step in the puddle? What did they do? They stepped in the puddle. Don't chew with your mouth. It goes on and on and on and on. And so when you're talking, remove barriers to connection. And if your kids or your partner is waiting for your next but, they are missing everything else. They just are. So don't say but. And when you do say but, go, sorry, wait, and because. Don't step in the puddle because those are white shoes. We just bought them. Can't do them. Something. Give them information, but doesn't really tell you anything. And it focuses you wrong. Move from but to because, or and, or find some other word. Or even just catch yourself. play a game with it. We're talking about connection. Connection through language, connection through family work, just connection through being together. Has anybody ever seen the TV show The Office? Love that show. Painful show to watch, especially if you're in any level of management or work with people, because we all think we're Jim or Pam. You are not Jim or Pam. You're Steve Carell. I'm sorry. You are that guy. I know I am that guy. So there's an episode on The Office where Steve Carell he joins improvisational theater. Remember this one? And he's terrible at it. Because every improvisational theme that they're practicing, he just pulls out an improvisational gun and shoots the guy. And then he says, I win. It's like, that's what conversation killers do in life. So you gotta reframe your life and think about your family's life and your life with your partner and your kids as improvisational theater. And whatever stupid line they pass you have to say, yes, and I still would like you to not step in that puddle because we just spent a lot of money on these white tennis shoes for the dance recital that everybody needs to be wearing white tennis shoes, and I don't have time to wash them, or I don't, whatever. But you just fill in the communication. So I thought this was fun. Don't disconnect. Don't use language that disconnects you from your actual goal. Because the primary need, and this is that kind of the fun part for me, the primary need, whether it's the DHH issue or a mental health issue, really, we're just people. And it's all together with us. Is to be witnessed. To be witnessed. You ever have your little kid come downstairs and go, Mommy, Daddy? You can't fix it, and you don't even know what it is. What are they asking for? It's just, can I get a witness? Yeah, I see you. Right? To be seen, to be really seen, to be understood, and to be connected. I think half the time, kids come down, it's just to be connected. One of the funniest things for Stephanie and I was when we were raising our kids when they were little, is it's kind of the family joke. It's mom, 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 mom. What, darling? Mom, mom. Now we could say we have a very needy daughter. Or we could say we have a very connected daughter who just loves that connection. And she just loves connection. Wow. It goes, she's 26 years old. And she was just home with us for a week, and I swear, every time Mom, I was like, here we go again. But it's that connection. Don't just connect. Yes, darling? Yes, honey? What now? But really, honestly, always never use these words. But honestly, always never. It's a game. Now, can you use those words? Sure. But catch yourself. Because if you're catching yourself using words that you don't want to use, you're teaching your children to be mindful of their language. And you're teaching yourself. I started doing this several years ago when I was working with kids and my staff. And I told them, so I said, stop saying but. And then they would catch me and I'd say, thank you, you know. But what would really happen is I'd be talking and I'd be on a long ramble and I'd say but, and then I'd be like, wait, and I'd have to restate it. And the craziest thing happened, guess what? The staff started doing it too. And the teachers started doing it. And the kids started doing it. Because guess what? We do what we're shown to do. We do what is modeled for us. And it teaches people to be mindful of what comes out of their mouths. And that has a big effect on things. It probably drives people crazy too. They roll their eyes and they make fun of me and, you know, oh, here we go. Oh, Jody said that. Now he's going to have to re-say it again. Yep, exactly. the best part of that is, because I'm a dad, it turns into a dad joke. You know what dad jokes are, right? Dad jokes are just things that are not funny, but we do them anyways, because we're dads, and we can. So, with my dad joke of the day, ban, but honestly, always make. You ever have people say, well, honestly, Jim, what's the first thing you think? Wait, the line before? Honestly, when you start a sentence honestly, or use the word honestly in a sentence, think about that. You're talking to a DHSP who's struggling to hear, struggling to figure out what you're saying, and then you start throwing curveballs like but and always and never. And honestly, so most of the time you're full of crap, but this time you're telling me the truth. You always told me that you're never gonna lie, but honestly, Santa Claus, I think you think about what you're saying. Use language for information giving instead of shorthand for connection. So listen to things that your kids are saying, because if we can teach kids to listen, then they'll talk. It's the weirdest thing. Because as parents, we think that we should be doing all the talking. And guess who's listening? Kind of are. But not the way we want it to. So there's this thing I came up with. Okay, so I have to, I'm kind of old at this point. I realize now I'm not this young staff person I thought I was a bunch of years ago. But the EF, does anybody when EF, remember that? Nobody does. So there was this ad campaign. Somebody in the back row who's old, please help me out. EF Hutton was this, I don't even know what they sold. I think they sold financial advice. And the guy would come out and say, when EF talks, people listen. And it's like, no, right. We got this EF Hutton thing going on here. When parents listen, kids can talk. And the trick is that you gotta listen 9 times and talk once. And the more you listen, and the more you listen, and the more you listen, the more people talk. I have a reputation in my family as being the big talker. I have this many siblings, and they're all introverted, and I think I was adopted. But I guess I wasn't. But anyways, they give me crap all the time about how much I talk. And in the last couple of months, there's been some big major changes in our big family, all that stuff. And I call my brother, who is the most introverted person in the world, and he went off like a fire hose for 90 minutes, talking about his children and his wife and his job and our mother and all of the things that were going on, and I did this for 90 minutes. Yeah, oh, wow, yeah. It was amazing. I got a call from my sister. 90 minutes. I have these introverted siblings that are, I called my other sister on the drive up to Minneapolis, and she talked for 2 hours. I listened. And I'm like, this is so funny because I'm the one with the reputation for talking, and I have done nothing but listen. But what the fun thing is that in the 9 listens to 1 talk, this was getting quoted. Oh, Jody said. Because if you can talk enough, if you can listen enough, what you say can start to matter. And what do kids want to see? They want to be seen. So if you want people to listen, if you want your child to listen, show them what that looks like. And there's nothing nasty, I don't know, maybe I'm the lucky person here, but my mom is a Finnish, and she's the Finns and the people in Wyoming, I think there's a lot of social distance and a lot of introversion. And she's just, I was home, and she just sits and she just listens, and she listens, and she listens. And It's the greatest thing to sit in the presence of someone who's listening to you. It's the best gift you can give your kid. It's the best gift you can give your partner. Even the partners that don't talk a lot. Because if you quit rescuing people that don't talk a lot, guess what? They have a lot to talk about too. Having your inside life come out and share it with another person is a connection. It's what makes marriages stronger, it's what makes families stronger, it's what makes everything stronger. But we get uncomfortable with that. We get uncomfortable with too much silence. Or we fill in the gaps. Or we just can't sit there in silence and listen to the silence. You learn a lot by listening to someone's silence and not pressuring them to fill it in with the words yet. Because it's emotion, isn't it? And there's like 4 ideas about emotion here. Emotions have labels. And if you can name your emotion, you can tame your emotion. I'm really nervous because y'all are looking at me like, so I don't know if I'm going to bomb in here. I'll never be invited back ever. Even down in the state of Wyoming, they'll put up a sign that says, do not enter ever again. If you can label your emotion, that's the first step. You name it to tame it. If you can talk about it. So with your kid, when they're really angry, you say, you look really angry? Happy? Upset? Concerned? Give them language. Give them vocabulary. Second thing is, emotions are felt in your body. Right? And here's the thing. Even emotional issues are felt in your body. And you have to feel it to feel it. There's a great quote. The reason you can't heal is because you won't admit you were hurt. So, when you're feeling, I don't know, heavy, when that surge capacity has just been drained, and when that ambiguous loss is like, it's not ever going to resolve, can you sit in the presence of someone that you want to connect with and you're connected with, and can you just feel that sense? And just say, I'm just heavy right now. It's right here. Or it's right here. Or my whole body just aches. It's emotions. You can talk about this. Every emotion has a name. Every emotion has a bodily sense. Every emotion has a need that is being expressed. I need resolution. I need to eat. And every emotion has an action tendency. This is kind of interesting. Because as men and women and children and boys and girls and all this stuff, we have tendencies, right? Some people, when they get anxious, they go for a run. Some people, when they get anxious, they drink. Some people, when they get anxious, they talk way too much, or they start telling other people what to do, right? People have tendencies. Guess who else does? Your children do. You know which one of them, right? Don't do that, because if you do that, Johnny is going to grab a stick and whack you. That's what Johnny does. He whacks you with his stick. Don't do that. If you do that, your sister is going to cry and throw mud. I don't know. But emotions have an action tendency, so you know what's about it. So beneath all these feelings, there's behavior, right? Beneath every behavior, there's feelings. Said that backwards. There's a lot of stuff. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see, right? When I was at home with my mother, she was looking at me, right? But she didn't see an old, bald guy with gray hair. She saw her son. And it's the coolest thing in the world to be seen for who you are and not for what. Isn't that neat? And when you look at your child, and when you look at your partner, and you see them for who they are, you know, that's where your child becomes the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And your partner becomes the most precious gift in your life. And where that teacher becomes a hero, and where that help becomes the best thing you've ever seen. It's not defined by what you see, it's defined by the meaning and the emotion. Your eyes will. Because the behavior is a symptom. It's just an expression. Now, do we always express our emotions really well? Of course, we're terrible at it, but we get better at it. So what do kids need? We know all this. There's three basic things. I love this because I can remember things in threes typically, right? Fours, not so much. Threes I can get. Here's what kids want to know. Are you there? Mom, 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 mom. Yes, girl. Are you there? Do you care? Is there anything worse in life than being around someone who you know is there but does not care? That's the worst thing in the world. And the last thing is, will you share? Are you there? Do you care? Will you share? In other words, what can I do? Will you share what you have, even if it's nothing? Because sometimes just holding the presence of nothing is a massive gift. You don't have to show up with a shiny prize every time. Sometimes share is just your attention. Dad, 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 dad. What? The game's on. I know. Dad. It's just attention. Will you share that part with your kid, with your partner? I love this cartoon. Will you validate my parking? Well, you did a really great job. You do these things nearly perfectly already. If you start thinking about validation, I just need some validation. There's a thing, I think Stephanie was talking about, there's a thing at the end was when you're done presenting, you have 15 minutes to complain, be validated, and then you have to drop and move on. It's really nerve-wracking sometimes how to do this, or get to do this. So what did I write up here? Oh. You feel validated when you connect with somebody. You feel validated when somebody sees you for who you really are and can read your silence as a novel. Right? Validation is not always agreeing, right? You don't have to agree with every dumb thing the partner did next or what your kid just did. You don't have to agree. You don't always have to problem solve. As a matter of fact, as a dad, it gets really, kids, especially my artist son, when I would try to solve a problem for him because I could see how dumb he would just like the dumbest thing ever. He's like, stop, don't solve my problem, let me make my own mistakes. And he's really good at it, making mistakes. And he's trying to learn from it, and I have to watch it. It's a test of my patience. But it's not problem solving. It's showing that you understand. It's showing that you get it. Isn't it great to be in connection with someone who gets it, who gets you? Like you've finally been found, like you've finally been seen. And when you validate someone with that attention, it answers three big questions. Right? You're there, you care, and you share. You share what you have, which is probably most likely your attention, and maybe including or family, or all this stuff I'm telling you, here's 14 more things you should do right now. Write these down and memorize them, commit them to memory. These are really brilliant, and this is not even my stuff. I stole it from a place called Conscious Parents, and they've got more of this stuff. It's the greatest stuff in the world. Got it? You're not writing. Here's some. My favorite Greek philosopher was mediocrity. It drives me crazy in this world of ours that you have to be. What do we want for our kids? We only want the best. Really? Are you nuts? The best? The best. Nothing below the best. I want the best of everything for my child. Well, I do. Okay, it's stupid. Because there's this massive range of human experience, but somehow my child deserves the best, which means all of y'all have to take a backseat to that. Best is kind of stupid. Good enough is actually a lot better way to think about things. Because good enough can be good and enough. So instead of good enough, as a, like, well, that's good enough, say, well, wait, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for good and enough. If you try to be perfect, you're going to get there? No. I've been on a diet now for about 10 years. It's not working. Not even a little. I think I'm fat. I don't know, but I'm fat. But there's a lot of ridiculous things you tell yourself. And when you start getting to a certain age, things start to really fall off the wagon and you kind of notice it. Yeah, I'm not going to be perfect. There's stress in trying to do it all. How many of you think you got to do it all? Well, that's because you all do. And dads, you're the worst. I mean, as much as your wives kind of outwardly do that, I'm just being really, really generalistic here. But we carry that stuff inside. I didn't make enough money. I didn't get home early enough. You know, you're not going to get there. You got to cut yourself some breaks. And there's also just a tremendous amount of work just trying to remember everything, right? So how do you turn good enough into good and enough? And the secret is gratitude. Because gratitude turns what you have into enough. So I came up with this new phrase. Engage your gratitude capacity. Your capacity to be grateful. You know, Stephanie was talking yesterday about looking at that child of yours and just losing yourself in the wonder of that child. Because that hearing loss that your child may have, that's their normal. That's who they're going to be. That is a massively beautiful thing. So if you can be grateful for that, and live into that gratitude, you got enough. It's good and good. Now here's the trick. Here's the dumbest trick I ever learned in residential work. And I would do this with kids who had a full-blown tantrum. And I'd walk up to Johnny and they're throwing pillows and swearing and all going nuts. And I'm looking at, oh man, Johnny, just one question. Wow! How come you're not doing worse? And they're like, what? You want me to do worse? I'm like, no. I'm so grateful that you're not doing worse. Can you imagine what this could really look like? And he goes, yeah! I can take that over there and dump it over. I say, you could! Thank you for not doing that. This is great. And what happens? When you go to a person and you say, oh, you're not doing, why aren't you doing worse? With all the stuff you're carrying, it's amazing that you're even standing. It's not sarcastic. It's just looking at life through a different lens. It's looking at life, instead of looking at life as a list of problems that are an inconvenience for you, an irritation for everybody around you, and a problem for you to solve, You look at it by saying, here's the deal, guys. A kid, you're doing the best you can. And if you don't believe that's true, you could do worse. And what happens when you start looking at problems that way is you start to say to yourself, well, I could be doing worse, but I could actually, I can probably do better. And you start thinking differently. I've seen kids go from full-on tantrums to quiescence and confidence by engaging their gratitude capacity, by engaging my gratitude capacity, which was, gosh, I'm glad you didn't knock that thing over, and we're just standing in the living room yelling at each other. That's a lot better than what we could be doing. I dare you to try it. It's kind of scary. There's no ways to be perfect. I already said this. There's a million ways to be good. But if you start by measuring your life with somebody else's ruler, you're really stuck. Because it ain't ever going to be that. The wonder of, and I'm going to go back to my shameless plug for my new program, the wonder of a decade 2 kid, those kids from about age 10 to 20, that second decade, is there's a lot of you. You ever notice how when people want to be really impressive, they start speaking French? I don't know if that works in Wyoming or not, but I'll tell you what, there's joie de vivre. What is joie de vivre? Well, I have to look it up, but it's a cheerful enjoyment in life. Kids, these decade 2 kids, when the brain starts to really take off on you, it's 11, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, they're all there. Okay, fine. Because they've got this joie de vivre, they're not afraid of anything. And it's their je ne sais quoi, right? I don't speak French at all. But it's that indefinable, elusive thing, and it literally means I don't even know what. But if you're trying to describe a decade 2 kid, it's like, I don't know, 10 to 13, 10 to 14, I don't even know, but there is something. You ever meet a middle school teacher who didn't like the middle school teacher? Did didn't like middle schoolers? I hope not, because they're phenomenal people. You love these kids. They're hilarious. What I'm getting at is the bottom line here is essence. The essence of this kid, the essence of your child. Now, whether they're a decade 2 kid or a decade 1 kid, or, wait for it, if you're a decade 3 kid, what makes you cool, what makes you fun, what makes you amazing is your essence. And your essence is this. And I stole this unashamedly from Dan Siegel. If you want to buy his books, he's got a million of them. This is from The Power of the Lesson Way. Essence. It's emotional spark. It's social engagement. It's novelty seeking. And it's creative expression. Here's how it works. You go to the big family or community Thanksgiving dinner, right? And all the adults, they're sitting at the big kid table, they're at the decade 3 table, and they're all talking about work and how awful everything is, and pass the beans, and I burnt the turkey, and all that junk. And then you look at the kid table, the decade 2 table, and what do? First of all, they're going like this. Hey, 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 ho, hey, hey, Billy, John, blah, blah, blah. They're just all over the place. They're just sparking everywhere. And then they're like connecting. Oh, hey, and what, and this and that, and this, oh, and look at us, and where the little kids table. And then Johnny takes out a green bean, and he puts it on his nose, and he says, hey, I have a mustache like Uncle Bill. Pretty soon everybody, oh, they're putting mashed potatoes on their chin. I'm gonna go eat, oh, you know. Now, right? The next question. And the parents are rolling their eyes and don't want to look over. But here's the thing, and Einstein said this, Einstein, but here's the deal. Dan Siegel said, one of the ways you keep your brain from rotting on you, decade 3 people, is don't put your decade 2 brain away. Don't forget your essence. Yesterday I was sitting, listening to Stephanie and all the speakers, but mostly Stephanie because that one had to get in trouble for not listening to it. So, I was trying to imagine everyone in the room as an 11-year-old. Because you're all sitting there like this. It's really hard to read the room. And I'm thinking, all right, but you know what? I'm just going to use Hunter because he can remember the name. But Hunter was an 11-year-old kid once. And I'll bet he was a barrel of fun. I don't know this for sure, but I'm just trying to shrink him down. Going, oh yeah, 11 years old. I bet we probably could have been friends, right? And you just start thinking about where'd that kid go? You want to connect to your kid? Don't forget that you were a kid. Don't forget what made you fun. Because they're doing brain studies on old people now, and they're finding out that when people don't lose their emotional spark and their social engagement and their sense of novelty, hey, let's try this. In their creative expression, their brains age with them. And they stay more effective and they stay more fun. So here's how you do it in real life. This is my blackboard to essence. Emotional spark. I went to myself one day and I went, I was exhausted. And I didn't want to do anything Saturday morning. And I found this quote on the interwebs, and so I thought, this is perfect for me. So I ran up to my stop sign. I'm super lazy today. It actually came from a friend of ours who's a drag queen. And it was like, well, that's perfect, because I'm so repressed I can't do any of that. But I said, here's my emotional spark. Oh, I'm super lazy. Where are they? And so socially engaged? Well, I didn't really want to engage with anybody socially. So I stuck it on my blackboard and people can drive by it all day long. That's my social engagement for the day, is to just put some junk up on the blackboard. And is it novel? Well, I'd never seen it before, and I thought it was kind of funny. And was it creative? Well, yeah, because I'm going to wear a cape. You know? And so, even when you're, whatever, a million years old like me, you can engage your novelty, and you can engage your spark, and you can engage society, and you can engage your creative sense, and have some fun with that. And if you're having fun with that, then so are your kids. Even if they're rolling their eyes because your dad is doing another one of his dad jokes again. It's fine. It's good. Because, honestly, why are we? The task that we have before us is really to construct the future, right? Those little ones that we hold in our arms, those babies, that get big and fast. That's what it's about, right? But it's not just about the babies. It's about us and our future. Because we're going to be the grandparents someday, hopefully, that our kids are quoting to their children. It's kind of cool. Constructing the future. I love this quote. The second quote I got from somebody from Montana, Sammy Buck. And, you know, she worked in residential work like I did, and she just retired. But she said, I didn't come this far to go this far. I came this far to go deep. And I just love that idea. You didn't come to this meeting today. You didn't come to this conference today to come to this conference today. You came to go past this conference. The only question is, what are you going to go past it with? And I hope there's something there for you. And I hope it engages the essence of you. That 11-year-old kid that you were, that you are. Anne Lamott, if you weren't looking for somebody fun to read Anne Lamott. But Anne Lamott said, when she's getting older, she had a birthday, and he said, oh, you know, wait a while to get older. And she says, you know, she said, I'm every age. And I just love that.
your every age. You're just adding jelly beans to the jar. You know, when you were 11, you were a rebel. And when you were 12, you're probably a green. And then when you were 17, you're probably, I don't know, one of those weird rounds, I don't know. But it's cumulative because you never really forget who you are. And you get to be every age you ever were if you can engage your essence. Don't let that go. So we're going to do all this change, and we're going to do all this work in our families one step at a time. First pants, then shoes. Just give yourself a break. Loosen up your buckle on your heart and start to chop. I don't know if you've got any job behind your hands in your child, but big job. And thank you, 5 minutes. From the dancing 5 minute sign, great. But loosen up your buckle on your heart and start to chuckle. Or you're going to die or safety jokes. Now, I am not a sinner, right? You don't know what this. Please don't do that again. I'm going to do it again because now I'm asking myself to do it again, and I like to have a little bit of fun. So, Safety Joe, so you can look it up on the internets, but Safety Joe is this guy who never reaches out further than his lonely arms will go, and he never takes a chance, and he never does anything. And the height of his whole existence was the day he was born. And John writes this beautiful song about Safety Joe. Safety Joe, Safety Joe. Where have you been? Where will you go? If you don't loosen up that buckle on your heart and start to chuckle, you're gonna die of boredom, Safety Joe. It's a good song. I tried to make Stephanie listen to it last night. I think she did almost die of boredom, but I do this to her a lot. It doesn't matter that she doesn't like it, it just matters that I get to do it. So when all else has failed, when all else has seemed to fail, failure is part of learning, right? Failure is just part of the process. You know, you can't learn anything you already know, because you already know it. You can confirm what you already know, but you can't learn something you already know. So when you learn something new, it's probably going to come because you screwed up. And you didn't know that before, and it changes everything. And you're going to feel like you failed because that's the old nonsense you're telling yourself. But when all else seems to have failed, it's a good idea to have a little poem in your heart. Now, I don't know if this is a room full of poets or not. Probably not. Nobody good thinks they're a poet. But you are. And I found this little poem, and I found myself reciting it one night in my sleep because I was having a rough, I've had a rough year. I don't know about you guys, I've had a rough year. And I love this poem. And it was going, and I just started doing it in my head. And it really helped. But I probably did it for, it seemed like a long time at night, but almost like a prayer, like a mantra. I'm going to give it to you guys, because it's not mine to give, it's out in the world. You can all see that, right? Life is mostly froth and bubble. Two things stand like stone. Kindness in another's trouble. Courage. I think everybody should have a poem they can pull out of their pocket. When our kids were little, we used to have these, we were friends with this family up in Georgetown, Colorado, and we would have poetry reading nights. And we're like, we don't do that. But we did. And you had to come to the pavilion, and we we'd light a fire, we'd do a potluck, and everybody had to bring it home. You could read it, or you could memorize it, you could perform it, or whatever, but you had to bring it home. And it started by this friend of ours who was from Ireland, and they do this all the time, I guess. So we were trying to do it too. But man, it was the coolest thing ever. And talk about getting out of your comfort zone. It was like, poetry, right? But I love these little nuggets that you can carry around. Life is mostly froth and bubble. Two things stand like stone: kindness in another's trouble, and courage in another. Kindness in another's struggle. How many of you are going to be around people that are struggling? Well, like this, everybody is. We all are. Every day. Whether you're at home, at work, whatever. Kindness in another's struggle and courage in your life. I love that. You should love it too. I think you should all memorize it and just get a tattoo or whatever. So motherhood, fatherhood, parenthood, all the hoods. It's the biggest gamble in the world. It's the ultimate act of optimism. What were you thinking? Right? But honestly, it is. So don't lose that. Don't lose your essence. Don't lose that optimism. And don't lose seeing who you hold in your arms, whether it's your partner or your child. And see them for who they are. And offer them kindness and courage. Because that will change the world. So, good for you. It's okay to validate it. All right, wow. Listening is love. Thank you.
Okay, we'll find someone else that knows more than us. We'd like to thank Jody for that great talk. And his PowerPoint is not in your packets, but I will email them out after the conference so that you have all of those quotes to remember. So, don't forget that if you need PTSB or STARS credit out there on the table, we can take care of those. And there was one more thing and I don't remember it, but it'll come back to me eventually.
The documents?
Oh, that's what I forgot. The documents that Nancy talked about yesterday, if you would put your comments on after reading them and put them in the basket for drawing for a gift card. We've only got one in there so far, so whoever that is, your chances are good. Okay, our next presenters, many of you should know. They're all from the Department of Ed. Christy Fritz, Billy Wortham.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Wait.
there's
Do you want me
Billy.
to hand this out, Billy? Yes.
Been out in the hall talking, they haven't even paid attention.
3 minutes.
3 minutes? Yes, just 3.
Do you want me to hand one to
So
everybody?
take a 3-minute break.
Yeah. Thanks. I just realized how light he was.
Right.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, 7.
Yeah, I love it, but I hate it all at the same time. Yes, all at the same time. My wrist is hurting, my back is hurting.
Yeah, I know I could see you kind of moving around.
But at least I get to listen. Right, right. And you get baby snuggles, so what's better than that, really? Looks just like her auntie.
No. I know she's got some.
Last time I saw her, she had that little girl
Gabby told you, I don't even see the way that my brain does. Other times than my question is, right? Like, I just remember her being little. I'm so old. What do you think? She's been through the process. I thought it was fantastic. I took this for my Natalie.
I know.
It's like, oh, it's okay. Yes. It was great.
Okay, while we're waiting, we'll draw for a couple more door prizes. Melody! Playing cards.
So you like the Rico bigger one? Yes. Did you upgrade one?
Yeah, I did.
13 here.
Olson.
Must be
I
perfect.
really like checking them out.
Okay. Got one more bookmark. Angie Bellamy wins the bookmark. And Kristen Wisdom.
Okay.
I put it away. Yeah, copy it. Oh.
Wendy, is it okay if we start?
I think so.
Kim, is it okay if we start?
Yeah. Let's start.
Anyone? Anyone?
You can start.
Like Ferris Bueller, right?
We're starting.
All right. All right, so there we go, guys. Thank you so much for coming. We always like to advocate for parents and providers. We're all very passionate about it. We'd also like to thank Hands and Voices for having us. Great organization. It's good for families to have advocacy. So we want to thank them for always inviting us in. We have 4 people today. 2 are with the Department of Education, 2 are independent. I myself am with the Department of Education as Kristen Fritz. And Janine Cole is a teacher with the Dept at Stride, which is in Cheyenne. Jennifer Hyder's in Colorado. She does the early intervention program and the school district. 3 highly qualified teachers at the Dept. So use their brains if you want to talk to them afterward. I am an audiologist and I'm in the Burlington office. I think that it's pretty self-explanatory what our slide says. It's really important for you as parents in your journey, whether you've got a baby, whether you have a 6-year-old, to understand when you sit in a meeting or you talk to providers,
what your child's rights are. I think that sounds very simple, but your child doesn't know their rights. So we want to kind of not necessarily expound upon the compliance piece, but to give you the information so that you can sit in a meeting or talk to a provider and know what's important. So when we talk about it, we're going to use some critical terms. Yeah. So Part C services are offered for 2 to 3 years old. Janine and I were talking ahead of time, and when you have that medical diagnosis of hearing loss, I think we all agree there should be an automatic IFSP written for that student. Because we think they're students as soon as they're born. Oh, yeah. That's true. Thanks, Christine. So Part B services are offered 3 to 5-year-olds. And then Part B carries all the way through 21. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're talking transitioning from the home to the school environment. And why they put C before B, we don't know. We call them baby Bs. DHH means deaf, hard of hearing, which we know that if you know one child with hearing loss, you know one child with hearing loss. That is the individualization of it. They can have 1 ear hearing loss, 2 ear hearing loss, severe, profound, mild, conductive, sensory neural. So deaf, hard of hearing is the whole spectrum. IFSP is your individual family service plan. Did I get that right? Yes. And that is what Janine and Jennifer are experts at, and they're going to be doing that part of the presentation. Second part will be Christy and I doing with Part B. What does that transition look like? We take that little one out of the home and we put them into a center. So.
Hello? All right, so there should be a handout to accompany this, differences between Part C and Part B. Do you have that? So just some differences between Part C and Part B. Again, Part C is 0 through the end of 2 years old. Part B is then starts at 3 and then ends all the way through 21 years old. So there's a handout that's going to be passed around that gives some of the differences for you to take home and read through. We won't read through the whole handout, but we'll go through it a little bit up here. So Part C overall supports the family. It's really about either coming into the home or to daycare, providing information, support, training for the family, and supporting the child in the family setting. Part B is more about supporting the child in accessing and participating in the general education preschool curriculum. Okay, so that moves more into like a school setting, more of a the preschool setting, the kindergarten setting, those sorts of things. Again, Part C is more about family. Part B is more about having that child access the education. A little bit more. Part C, services are provided in natural environments, such as a child's home or daycare, or any other environment an infant or toddler might be in who's does not have disability. Okay? So that might be in a daycare. Your speech and language pathologist might go to a daycare setting, or a home setting to provide those Part C services. Part B is more about the restricted environment. And what that means is the place that children who are, in this case, hearing, not deaf or hard of hearing, but hearing, where they're receiving their preschool services, where they're attending their preschool within the community or within the child development center. That's where those services are usually provided for Part B. So part of this presentation, the first part, is really focused on that Part C, part, that family-oriented. That part, it could be these two topics. We'll be focusing on that Part C, that family support, that what can we do, what can parents do, what can be provided for those children in daycare settings and things like that. So our experts at the IFSP are Janine Cole and Jennifer Hyder, who both work in that Part C area. And then when they're done to go, maybe a little break, I'm not sure, and then we'll transfer over to
Yeah, and if you went to Callie's presentation yesterday and Nancy's presentation, we have a wonderful newborn identification program in Wyoming. We've screened 98.6, I don't know, Sarah, if that's exactly right, but over 98% of our babies in the birthing hospitals are identified, so it's not like we don't know they're out there. We do miss a few home births and we miss a few live births.
And then I need the other. Well, good morning, everyone. So yeah, we're gonna start with the part C, and just to kind of know who's in the audience, how many of you, now that you know part C is babies up to 3, and then part B is at 3 on. How many families right now are in the part C world? So you've got little ones. Okay, all right, and then I'm assuming the rest of you are in the part B world, so you've got kiddos that are 3 on. Okay, great, I love that, that's a nice little mix. I asked that because we are going to be doing an activity at the end well, here's our big kind of two things for our outcomes. Our presentation, yes, we are going to go over some of the basic components or the big main components of the IFSP. We're also wanting to, at the end, we want you guys to really take away this idea of play and language, playing and talking, and how powerful that really is, how powerful play is, and just being very intentional when we do play with our little ones, that we're just kind of thinking about some of those strategies, language strategies, we'll go over all that, and we're incorporating them into our play. And you guys are already doing all this. We're just giving it a name. We're giving it kind of a, fancy little name, little term, but we're already doing this. So it's going to be fun. At the end, we're going to play. So we'll kind of get up and move around and do that. So those are the kind of our outcomes for our first part.
Hello. All right, we begin by, I'm Janine. We begin by talking about what is the IFSP. Just like Christy had mentioned, it is a child is eligible from birth to age 3. And with it, what we're looking at is the first criteria is, does the child have a medical diagnosis? And for our kids with hearing loss, yes. They're identified at birth, they have a medical diagnosis, they're eligible for an IFSP. And the thing to think about is, the important one is there's a high probability of the result of a future delay for that child. And obviously a child with hearing loss doesn't have access like a child that is born hearing, So we want to make sure and get that intervention as early as possible, and to make sure, most importantly, that they're amplified and that the amplification is functioning and they're wearing it 24/7 or all waking hours. Next, the eligibility is that there is a delay in one domain area, so it would be like 2.0 standard deviation below the mean. If you're a statistician, you get it. 1.3 in 2 areas, so that would be just looking at the whole child and making sure that if we see that delay, that we're getting that early intervention in the IFSP. What happens with an IFSP is there's a yearly review, and then every 6 months, we review it again. I have copies of an IFSP that I'd like you to take a look at, because the first page talks about what the family, just information about the family. The main components in my mind with the IFSP is to look at what does the family want? What is the family outcome? And oftentimes, the family service coordinator who coordinates the meeting will kind of say, well, what do you think you need? I do think with a child with hearing loss, we need to kind of lead the parent to kind of think about the big picture, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And that's kind of, the title of our presentation is Thinking Outside of the Box. Okay, so kind of thinking big picture and leading a parent or families to see what they possibly might need, and just teaching them about the hearing loss and those things. We're going to talk about some ideas for family outcomes. And also these could tie into later on when you get into an IEP and that type of thing, and what would be important for a child. All right, next we're going to talk about who should be at your IFSP. Obviously, the child and family, the most important, in the center. The family service coordinator, and I work at Stride, and we have great family service coordinators that organize the meetings and do all the paperwork, which is even better. You might want to have an OT and PT there to make sure that those areas are evaluated as well. Definitely you want an audiologist involved. Whether the audiologist is at the meeting or not, you want to make sure that you have that audiology information. Next, your speech language pathologist. And then I'm going to add, I'm a teacher of the deaf. I advocate for teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing to be at our IFSP meetings. We've got fabulous speech pathologists at Stride. I do think that a teacher of the deaf just looks at certain things a little bit differently, and we've got, I think, taking the big picture with some self-advocacy type things, and as we go on, you'll see some of the other areas. But that's who I advocate for to be at an IFSP meeting.
Okay. So let's go through kind of just a quick, for some, this will be an overview. For some of you, it might still be some things that you're kind of learning about as far as your child's hearing loss, in what that means, what that sounds like, what that looks like. And so let's just kind of go over, do a quick little, hope it works. You guys have all seen the audiogram several times now, right? There we go. Cool. Okay, so this is, I mean, you guys have, does anybody want to talk about the audiogram? Anything you know about the audiogram? Just yell out. I don't know.
It's like golf.
I know.
The lower the number, the better your
There you go. There you go. Yeah. I mean, you guys have all seen this, right? Have you guys plotted your child's hearing loss on the audiogram? On an audiogram like this? Yourself, or maybe a service provider, audiologist. Yeah. I think that's great. I think that is, taking this and plotting your child's hearing loss, just knowing those terms, being familiar with those terms, super, super important. And I'm sure like several of you guys have.
Well, I think it's important too to plot the audiogram with the amplification off and the amplification on. Because it's important to know what that child, the access, because not all hearing aids bring it up to the normal limits for a child. Not all cochlear implants bring it up to the normal limits. So it's important to have that information as well.
Yeah, and so just quick overview. Do you know what this thing, it's not highlighted as well in there, but it's usually, sometimes it's colored, but it's kind of in a shape of it's a fruit, banana. Yeah, the speech banana. Yeah, and so I just, this is such a powerful tool. And the more you become familiar with it, and the more, because you know what, when you move, you go to another school, whatever might happen. This is something you can bring out, you can plot, you can say, this is where my kiddo's at. Like this moderate loss, mild loss does have an impact. Look at the sounds we are missing, So it just is, the audiogram, and I love these types of audiograms. I think they're just very parent user friendly. How about simulations? Simulations. You guys
gone through some hearing simulations before? This is a quick one, YouTube one. A minute.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond. This
I read in the newspaper today that a new theatre's opening. Isn't it great?
Sure is. What plays are they showing?
I think it'll be the one we saw last year. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. Will you go to it again?
The play is so good, it's really worth it.
You're right. I would be interested to see if they do have it as well.
The director is relatively unknown as well.
These directors usually have a different perspective on film. We can see that, sir.
Look, let's ask some friends. I'll find out who's interested.
Okay. I'll go to hospital compliment the wall.
This is great to use with relatives too, because oftentimes you'll hear, well, they respond to sound. You know, they hear me. But it's one thing to hear, and it's another thing to be able to comprehend language and to be learning language and hearing it along the way. It's kind of like me going to China and trying to learn Chinese with earplugs. Not that it would matter if I have the earplugs or not, but you know, I would be learning the language, and it's kind of gives you an idea.
And, you know, I always say, you know, that simulation is with, you know, technology, right? You know, amplification there, and then we have the amplification. And next slide, here's all good, you know, I mean, it's amazing what we've done with technology. The three main ones here, the hearing aids, cochlear implant, Baha. Is there, these are short links, and I think instead of going through and doing a quick review, because you guys, I mean, these are things that are all online and you can find it. Is there any questions on any of the three? The Baha, hearing aid, cochlear implant, we have all three maybe represented here? I bet. Baha, cochlear implant, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Hearing aids is they amplify all sound. Okay, so there's still that noise component. And a big thing with amplification also is distance. So distance and noise are a problem for a child with hearing loss. So that's why you want, especially that first year, even if they're going to have an implant, you still want to make sure that that access is there that first year. And of course, I'm a real advocate for sign language personally, but to remember that. And Billy, you help me out with this, but cochlear implants as well, it is measuring the microphone, correct? Or am I way off base? I'm just saying that typically I know that the best I've seen with a cochlear implant is like 15 or 20 decibels. So that's still a mild loss. And that's important to understand, and I don't know that always, I don't know if parents are informed of that with their audiologists.
I do have one more comment on this side. Technology. My comment is actually promoting sign language, because we do have students that are born with what's called neuropathy. And that is a disconnect between the inner ear, where you normally would hear where most problems are, and the brain. So that's where we promote sign language from like day one, because that is the only language they will have is visual. So I got off on a tangent there, but we have two this year that we have found, and that is not good. Yeah, these two don't. Yeah. Again, it's the medical report. I want to use sign language.
Yeah, and that actually moves right kind of into, that's what, you know, we wanted to just, you know, audiogram, you know, the simulation, kind of a quick overview, kind of all leads into the big piece of the IFSP. And that's the family outcome, which is correlated to the IEP as the goals, the student's goals. And in the IFSP, we call it a family outcome. And so here's just, it all kind of leads to the specific, a child with a hearing loss, like to be put it in such a good, nice way. We as the professionals do need to help guide our parents into, well, what kind of family outcome, what goal are we working on? What do we need to know? We don't know what we don't know. And so here's just some things to think about as you and the team are creating some of those family outcomes or those goals. So like the auditory environment.
And what we did is we created some generic ideas. Don't take these away as the only thing. But we created particular ones that we might use to think about for these areas.
You wanna go? Okay, so let's just go back to this real quick. So we've got the auditory environment, we have hearing loss and technology, communication modes, auditory, verbal, the sign, all of that. All that information we need to consider. The language is huge, and I mean, that's just a short kind of breakdown of all the different language things, targets, things that we would target. The social emotional behavior and self-advocacy. We have, and that's what's so, I think, huge in this area, is that self-advocacy it's not about high school anymore. It's not about older kids. It is self-advocacy for babies. It is self-advocacy from day one. And families, yes. And so it is just, that's an area where I think has, we're just kind of leading the way in it, because I think we know how important it is. The older they get, it's like, why not just start one for babies?
Let me define the language ones real quick in case you're not totally aware of them. Receptive language is a language that you understand, the language that the child understands. A lot of that is following directions when they're younger. Expressive language is what they're able to say or sign, the language they give to you. Semantics is more like the grammar of language. I'm sorry, syntax is the grammar of language. Semantics is more like the meaning of language. And then vocabulary is obviously all the different labeling things. And labeling a vocabulary is one thing, but we want them to be able to know how to use that language, because it happens quick with little hearing children. And then pragmatics is more the social language. And this is for another presentation, but I was reading an article the other day about the importance of pragmatics with children with hearing loss and some of the gaps that children with hearing loss have in that social language. So if you can, at some point, Google that one too. But it's really interesting to look at.
As far as like services and providers that really address that, like social communication, what I've just seen in my experience is there's like this confusion on, is that the speech therapist? Is that
Whose role is it to
Yes.
help support the
social
pragmatics?
worker, TOD, things like that, that like it's not unified and it's not all addressed, or like, well, that's your goal. Sorry,
That's
that's
your
your
area, target that.
And so like instead of like sharing it, and like that being part of, which I think the TOD kind of oversees, but I don't know, I've ran into situations where that is not the case.
I'm gonna just repeat it for the captioner. So the question is about whose role is it to work on the pragmatics on a team? Is it the teacher of the deaf? Is it the speech language pathologist? You know what, I'm gonna say it's everybody's role.
Right,
But
but
that's
at some point you gotta put your name on it.
Right. But I'm thinking, as far as the IFSP, I would think it would be the collaboration between the people that are working on the communication with the child. Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know that I answered your question at all.
If you're doing it, continue to do it, because it's a huge need.
I guess the first thing is knowing that it's important, because I don't know that I see the pragmatics component as part of the IEP or the IFSP.
So if we take those things and we kind of now, these are, like Denise and we just have some examples of some outcomes that you might generate off of those things. So if you look at this language one, the family will support the child's vocabulary by increasing their self-talk and parallel talk during routine activities and playtime. So it will talk about self-talk and parallel talk, right? This is a big language goal of just you want to expand your child's language and to expand your child's language. So that is just one example of a language goal. Social emotional one, I love this one. This is actually Janina's doing this one.
This one is, I happen to have a classroom, I'm lucky at Stride, that is, and we call it our DHH classroom, deaf and hard of hearing, but really we have kids that might have apraxia of speech, who have some language delays, and they use sign language. So it's really, the whole class is typically signed most of the time. And the other, we also have typical language children with typical language development. And actually it's fun because they're signing as well. So everybody has a signing, we try to do as much sign as possible. So something I did with the family that I thought was important was I have a little girl who's just amazing, and she, we put up a goal that we would provide an opportunity for the child to have direct interaction, communication with other children who are deaf or hard of hearing by attending the DHH classroom once a week. And this little one comes in, and the most awesome thing is she sees other kids that have cochlear implants. She sees other kids, who use sign language. And it's hard in some places in Wyoming because obviously our numbers are not large. But if there's any opportunity to get deaf role models, so those children see somebody that has, that they can see that there are other people that have communication issues or wear amplification of some kind.
A behavior one, an example of this one is, kids say no real quick. Everything's no, we're always signing no, and this one really is kind of that idea of let's think of different ways to promote that positive behavior and not always, using that negative, which is quick to go to it. So, parents have asked, what else can we do? And it's like, okay, well, let's think about this. How are other ways that we can, reinforce that positive behavior? Or if it is that negative, how can we communicate that? How do we sign it? How do we show it? Self-advocacy, that they'll wear their technology all waking hours, which we know is really tough. But that is a big goal. I will say almost in Colorado, almost all my kids have had this type of goal of wearing their devices. We've got a few with Bajas, and when they're little, keeping that Baja on is tough. So that's part of that self-advocacy piece. And then starting to do those self-listening checks. Ultimately, we want a kiddo that does a self-listening check themselves, them to know something's going on with my technology here.
Those are the link sounds that we do as they get older. Those are important ones because you are accessing each of the different frequencies.
And then the last one is just kind of an outcome, a goal of just understanding that child's hearing loss. That you're able as a parent, you can describe it, you could talk about how it impacts that child in different auditory environments, right? We have the same conversation like in the home, we're working and it's so quiet, TV's off, everything's off, and it's just optimal listening. Child's right here. Well, boy, does that change real quick when we go to childcare, we go to grandma's house, or, in the car. There's just, yes, I just like to push it a little bit more and say, but think of all those different environments that we're in, and consider that because it absolutely has an impact. And so we just need to really consider all those environments, and it can be challenging for a little one to hear in some of
once again, thinking outside of the box. In IFSP meetings, they're targeting what does your family need, what's a family outcome. And of course, you're going to look at the whole big picture and what the family needs. But this is another component you can add that might be specific to the hearing loss.
Those of you that are Part C right now, is there a family outcome that you have that you would like to share? That you were like, this is what we're doing and it's really great, it's really working. And if you were sure, that's okay. You saw if there was a Part C family that
Or service provider.
or service provider. Yeah, it really is. It's just like they'll get into the IEP. It's individualized. That's the big takeaway. It's individualized. Like make it what you need. It doesn't need to be the same thing over and over again. Yes, ma'am.
Just from my experience, it's nice to see examples like that.
It's nice to see examples like that, especially for parents that aren't aware or educated at all when it comes to hearing loss. So when they're like, well, what do you want for your child? You know, I want them to meet their developmental milestones. I mean, who wouldn't? So then that's kind of like, it's very intimidating, even with an educational background, that you're like, because you don't want to make the wrong choice. And so having examples like that, I think, would be something very useful for some of those brand new parents.
So take them and make them your own, because I agree. See, we can get stuck in the same thing over and over again, and we look back and go, what did we really work on? You know, so. Oh.
Because we didn't write it down until last night. And she was so efficient.
There's a new PowerPoint that we can send to Wendy or to
Yes. There have been a few changes, you're right.
We do that, that's how we roll.
But you know what, yes. That, they will be good to have. Yes, I'm glad that you'll have it updated, because it is, yeah.
And like I say, I want you to think big picture though. Think of ones that you can create or work on. Because that's just a small example, but there's a lot of them that relate to those different areas.
Great. So let's kind of shift into, the second part, which is, so we're kind of putting the IFSP components, parts to the side, and we've talked about the outcomes. And so now, so here's our outcome. What do we do with that? How does that look in a session, or as, when the provider leaves and you're working with your kid and you're thinking of that outcome, what does that look like? So both Janine and I are just, it's language, talk. And I think sometimes when we go into a session, especially Part C, and even in 3 to 5 in preschool, it's a lot of play. And you're just like, okay, what are we just playing here? Like, what are we doing? And yeah, we are, we're totally playing. But we are targeting and we are very intentional of just a couple things that we're really going to work on when we're playing with something. And so that's what we're going to talk about and
It's
kind of
also
demonstrate.
teaching the parent how to use play and to facilitate language. Because a parent is the main teacher. And the goal in Part C is to work with the family.
And because of time, you guys, who's familiar with the Lena?
We have done the Lena.
Okay. This website is awesome. And you can go to it. And there's this particular one, it's about conversational terms. Big takeaway, the more conversational terms, more vocabulary. Makes sense. They're correlating it after 10 years of research that they gathered from all of you that have done the Lena across the country, including Wyoming. They're linking it to higher IQs.
What the child does is they wear a little vest.
Oh, yeah. Well, should I demonstrate it, or are you guys okay with the Lena?
Yeah.
It's just a little vest. They wear a little vest.
Sarah has one out there.
They should, right?
Yeah.
Wear a little vest, and in that vest is, I don't little recorder deal that, a little recorder, and it captures for 24 hours what you say to the child and what the child is saying. And then they put it into the computer system, a program, and it pops up this beautiful graph of your vocabulary. There it is. Like not what you're saying, but like the number of words you're using, the conversational terms, the quality of the child.
It's kind of little, so we can't really model it. But.
Yeah. So what's amazing about this is, 10 years, and you guys have if you've done it, you've been a part of this study. And the big takeaway, which I don't think is a surprise to anybody, but it's just correlating vocabulary in conversational terms. I do like how they're kind of taking it to the next step and say, but it's that turn taking, that back and forth engagement, is correlating to just the higher IQ. And I think that, again, this is there's several short little videos on this, and I think it's very, very powerful stuff. So thank you for those of you that did the Lena. Did you enjoy getting the feedback? Was wonderful. How many times did you do it? I think we've done it 3 times. Awesome.
It's like, okay, you've done it 3 times.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
The feedback from the Lena has been the most helpful by far on all the services we provided.
Good.
It's really specific to not just general advice, but specific areas that we can improve. And
It's really looking at the family.
The caregivers.
Looks at the auditory environment, how noisy it is or isn't when you're talking to your child. It's amazing. It's so neat. So big takeaway from that is we got to talk. We have to have conversational terms, and yeah. So that's what. Oh, sorry. Next one.
Jennifer, if they wanted to use it and add that, should they talk to their provider?
In Wyoming, I don't know. In Colorado, I have somebody that I contacted.
Jan, do you know her?
I would maybe know.
Yeah, I would say talk to your provider.
Just talk to your provider.
Because they can definitely get it.
Talk to the provider, and they can help you to do that. And if you're connected with Susan Fisher with the READ program, a lot of the families do it.
I follow them sometimes, but if they're gonna come back, talk to Janet, they gotta clip it.
Okay, next we're talking about language strategies. So hold on to this because there's going to be a test here. All right, first thing we're going to go quickly because then we're going to play. When we're looking at language strategies, an important thing to do with your child is self-talk. So I'm going to talk about what I'm doing here. I'm cooking, I'm making this dinner. Oh, this is so hot. Oh, we're going to have peas for dinner. Oh, we're going to have corn. I'm so hungry. Your child's right there. You're talking to yourself. It could drive you crazy, but that is so vital for all children in language development. Parallel talk is where you're talking about what the child is doing. Okay? Oh, look, you're building with blocks. Look at that's a tall tower. How many blocks do you have? Well, let's see. 1, 2. Oh, you're building all those blocks. Look at you. Uh-oh, you knocked them down. That type of thing. You're talking about what the child is doing. Model. Talk. I emphasize sign language. Learn as much as you can and use it. Facial expressions, vital. There's nothing more boring than watching someone sign and I'm so happy. Well, you've got to use your facial expressions, and that's a vital part of American Sign. Act out, pretend, repetition, again and again and again. Jennifer's going to do her favorite, +1, add a word expansion.
Oh, yeah. But +1 is just, it's in here, we'll demonstrate activity, because this is what you guys are all going to do. We're going to break up into groups, and you guys all will have something to play with.
Don't run out of the room before, because the doors are locked.
So this is so funny. This is like, I don't know, kids love this, and I was like, really? But they do. But they go fishing, and I did this the other day with one of the kiddos. And it was right? You know, oh, it's a purple, blue, I don't know. No, purple fish, you caught some purple fish. You know, and I was like, yes, we caught purple fish. So let's add one more thing about that purple fish, you know? And so it's just, you know.
The little purple fish.
Little purple fish, and the little purple fish is gonna go swimming. You know, exactly. And so you just add something more to it. Like and it was so cute because this mom was so into the colors, right? And she was like, oh, but I think this is blue and this is purple. And I said, you know, it's okay. She'll figure those out when she gets in preschool, believe me. And I said, let's talk more about, you know, the fish and what it's doing. Let's sign it. Let's just add one more thing.
The child might give you fish plus one, and a big fish, you're right, it's a big fish. Yeah, remember we went fishing?
Yeah, so it's just something simple, a game like this, an activity like this, and again, it just goes back to being that intentional thing. You guys are doing it all the time, you're just thinking, oh, you're right, it is a blue fish, but we're gonna just add a little bit more descriptor to it. So, that's my example. She's got my example.
Okay,
Love boxes.
This box is been used for about 8 months now. Everybody loves this box. This is something we do. The thing I'm thinking about in my head as the teacher, I'm thinking about self-talk and I'm thinking about prepositions. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna get this old lady's gonna get
And facial expressions.
I'm gonna get in that box. Where am I? I am in the box. I'm in that box. Okay. What do I need to do? You're right. I need to get out of the box. Help me. They help me in school. You know? I'm talking about what I'm doing, and then I get the little kid, okay, and I say, what do you want to do? Oh, you're gonna go in that box. Nothing they like better than. I mean, I'm telling you, forget Christmas, buy boxes. Okay, but it's just, we can spend a lot of time with it. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna get behind that box. Where am I?
Next to.
You peek. I'm beside it. And I know with my group of kids, this little one's working on in and out. This little one, I'm gonna go a higher level. We're gonna do next to, behind. In my mind, as a teacher, I know what I'm targeting. Right? Sometimes I don't know what I'm targeting. But, and then under. Under was the favorite this year because we had a blanket. And everybody wanted to get under this blanket. It's as if COVID did not exist in our world, but everybody wanted to get under this blanket. There was so much we could do. Get under the table. Anyway, just things you could do at home in your own environment. All right, now it's your turn. We have helpers. If our helpers can come up, get their activity, they're going to lead you. And what we want you to think about is, we'll go back and put that slide up, Jennifer, the self-talk. We just want you to think about your little one, or when your little one was little, and some of the things that you would do. You could do self-talk, parallel talk, turn taking. Another one I didn't talk about, and most important, wait time. And it's hard for a parent to wait. Okay? It's so important to wait. Don't jump in and answer. Okay? Oh, where are we going to go? Oh, you're right, the store. Wait. Wait. And if they don't give it to you, of course, then you give it. But you give time for a child to answer. I think we're so quick to want to answer for them and give them the information that we forget about the wait time. Anyway, okay, ladies.
Okay.
I don't know. We're going to break. You know, I didn't get together in groups of like 3 or 4. Okay, Christy Fritz, you're over here with these 4. Okay, is it okay? All right. We can maybe do 5. Okay, if you guys want to turn around. What are you doing? Joe? 3 or 4. Create a group. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes to work on it. We will report out.
You're right.
Christy, can I give the captioner, tell me, take a break?
So you're well.
Okay, captioner, take a break, because we're breaking up into small groups. Thanks.
I will attend this.
You know, we've got, with this one, what I liked was when we talked about all the different, like, birds, like, they all kind of, everybody's got, like, their own chickens, but we can kind of talk about, that's a. You can do whatever makes you happy.
Okay, yeah. I think they kept sharing, don't you? They've been sharing. Like, about 2 hours. I think a horse is insane. You think that? Right. Okay. You know. But it is, yeah. Take out the speakerphone at a time. For you to make mistakes. Yep. Positions, your the orange ball.
5-year-old right now, everybody is a bee. Everybody is a bee. Right, yes, yes.
Mom already tried. She gave it right away. Tried not to
One of their first concerns is, I can't understand it. I always said, if I can't understand it in my office, I have to.
Okay, there will be time for just a quick share out. Who's willing to share?
Is that your first time?
Yes.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just taking, I think it's the big takeaway,
Let me go find somebody and see if they can turn that's it.
Well, whenever we moved out, like, for a little while, I to go into the issues, but it's just. Yeah, and I love that. Right. Maybe if one of the girls was sitting in front of the door, they would pop it up. Yeah, but I'll go ask you.
I'm ready to conceptually understand that, but
I would definitely put an adult in front of the door a little bit, and then I'll show
okay, I'll just let you guys kind of finish up your conversations, and then we'll do a quick little share out, and then we'll have a break, right? Okay. And then, Couchner, you are Belle, right?
You gotta change it up, every time. So we're gonna change it up now, and we're gonna make our own.
Joe on her phone. You guys are gonna do your share out.
She wants. Get your Play-Doh out.
All right, you gotta wrap it up. Wrap it up. All right, Christy Fritz, your table, and you go as you wish. You know what? I want you to do whatever you decide to do.
So, do any of these parents want to share? All these parents have great ideas. Do you want to share some ideas? Anyone? Well, one of the things that we talked about, this father talked about was knocking the animals. We have little animals and balls. One of the ideas he had was throwing one of the balls, some of the balls over and knocking over an animal, right? And the words that you can use to do that are what? Like the size of the ball, throw the orange ball, throw the soccer ball, let's kick it. Mom said, let's kick it. You know, oh no, the elephant, he fell over. Oh, is he okay? And talking about that little elephant and, oh gee, does he want to play some more? Oh, I hope he's okay, let's give him a kiss. And talking about the whole thing instead of saying just kick the ball, adding all of that other language on just makes it.
So would you say that you were doing more self-talk?
So we were doing self-talk, we were doing the wait time, some of the parallel. Yep. So another idea was that one of the mamas had was putting the ball in the basket and out of the basket, and which ball, and talking about different shapes of the ball. The colors of the ball. And one of the things that came up too is just the fact that these are all different kinds of balls. There's a soccer ball, a volleyball, maybe a kickball, like orange ball. Not just about the white ball or the ball or the small ball or the kickball. Labeling them and giving those kids labels.
And I think you had to take it too with the incidental learning. A hearing child will hear about, we'll go to the soccer game or their friends playing soccer and they have a soccer ball. A child with hearing loss may have to be taught that specifically. All right, thank you, group. So far, they're the top dogs. All right, this group. Betsy.
So we had a little farm book and farm animals. And we talked about, and little magnets. And we talked about, we talked about not having all the toys out right at the beginning, because that could turn into a disaster. But finding in the book, like, oh, there's a turtle, can you find the turtle? And then, you know, is it the same? Is it different? Going on a little scavenger hunt, you know, hiding the little animals and saying, you know, go find the turtle, go find the cow. Can we match them? Are they the same? Talking about all of these are birds, but they're not all the same bird. So again, it's a hen, it's a rooster, it's a bluebird. Let's see. Talking about this, we have like a little picture book, or a peekaboo book. So knocking on the door, opening, you know, what do you think's inside? And then waiting to see, you know, what the guess is. And then sometimes making a mistake, saying, oh, I think, you know, a monkey is inside. And then having, you know, the child open it up and go, it's not a monkey, it's a horse. But kind of that where they're giving you the information instead of just agreeing with everything the grown-up says.
Love it. That's a great, awesome.
Thanks, Betsy. All right, Billy's group. You have a speaker or are you it?
I had an awesome group, but naturally I did a lot of the talking. And I'm not a teacher, I'm an audiologist, so I always focus on clarity of language. These parents are parents of a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I always like to start where I think language might be. So obviously, we have Teddy. It was really hard to name him, and we took him on a picnic. And I think one of the things that I am big on is backtracking the language and saying, what did we do today? Well, we went on a picnic, where did we go? Just to build up that language. So, Mom here had a good point.
So we don't agree, we don't like baby talk. Our 7-year-old who is one of the let hearing loss, tries to really baby talk with our son. And so that's something that we try not to let her do. And she doesn't do it to be mean, she tries to be more caring about it. But I don't agree with it.
We talked about wait time, we really did. That's really hard. We got an older sibling here who's awesome. How about your older sibling?
My daughter is 4.5 and son is 18 months younger, and she will kind of emulate all these kind of things. Like she tells him like, oh, okay, oh look, is it yellow? Can you say yellow? Oh, good job, Ben.
And the reason that I focus on that, when I would have patients come in my office and I couldn't understand the child and I should have been able to understand the child, I knew we had an issue, but I also discourage baby talk. Because if it's a blanket and you want to call it a softie, call it a softie. Don't call it a dada. You know, dada. No, I want clear, concise speech because that's what leads to clear, concise building of language. And I am a big backtracker. When we went on our picnic, we backtracked. What did we do today? Oh, it was a nice day. Did Teddy have fun? I talk all the time, which is why I have dogs. I talk to my dogs all the time. I can't stop talking because that's what builds language. So, I don't know. I'm not a teacher, but we try.
No, it's all stuff that we know and we do.
And sometimes the language is so cute because my oldest son, I remember he called a hamburger a hang-a-burger. And we loved it so much that we just couldn't stop calling them hamburgers. But he is 29 and he now calls them hamburgers, so we're okay. Right, Joe, final one.
I'm going to piggyback onto that baby talk because, yes, I agree too, the baby talk is, but keep in mind there's mother-ease talk, that pitchy, no, it's okay, you know, and all that, that intonation and pitching. It's part of a young baby learning to talk because you're keeping their attention by using mother-ease. I'm going to give it to one of my members here, and do you want to start with that or do you? Well, I'll finish with this part. The one thing that we got into is talking more about the chromatics. Okay, we're talking about a fish. Then we talked about a fish as a noun, a name. Then we went into their fishing, you know, making it into a bird. and be very careful to show that we're still using that same word, but we're changing how it's being used in the grammar.
Love it. You guys are awesome. You guys act like you play a little bit.
So I'm a speech language therapist for elementary schools. I don't always have the little itty bitties, but a lot of times when my kindergartners come in, we work on a lot of similar activities. So we, I did point out there's, language milestones where things are developmentally appropriate. And I have students that are working on past tense verbs, and it's really hard to say, oh, we're going to catch a fish today, and we caught a fish. So verbs become important. We talked a little bit about pronouns and he and she and they instead of everybody being he or they are always them. Another one is when Joe brought out the Play-Doh. It's great. Let's do prepositions. We have to take off the lid. We have to take the Play-Doh out. We have to put it in. We have to put the lid on. So I like those Play-Doh things where you're squishing them through the nose and the hair is growing because you got all these verbs and you have all these prepositions. So there's just a lot of things you can do. One of the comments was made in our group too that this can be really exhausting, right? When that happens and you're tired of narrating life, pick up a book because all of that language is in the book and you don't have to come up with it.
All right. Well, we are moving on to the next part of our presentation. I do want to just tell you real quick, at Stride, I'm really lucky because we are going to have a little statewide demonstration preschool, and it's going to be on Zoom. It's going to be every Monday afternoon from, I think our time is, I think it's 1 o'clock. We'll have it open from 1 to 2, and it's going to be for parents and service providers, infant through. We're actually going to pull in 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds that are in kindergarten. If a kindergarten teacher or a teacher of the deaf wants to be part of that, they can be part of it. We just want to make sure you're consistent. And then all of my students that I have Monday through Thursday morning will be, hopefully be on as well with their parents, caregivers, or whoever. Really, it's just kind of supporting what we're doing in our classroom. So I have flyers about that if you want to. All right, Billy and Christy. Well, they just said we could give if you want to just, you know what, if you need to use the bathroom, go run and use the bathroom and just please, yeah, it says 10 minutes, but sorry, it's not going to be 10 minutes.